All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Young Brando, live from Los Angeles. I'm here with a very special friend, a new friend to me, but a friend of our community member, Basil's Bezels. Uh, Sorry about that. Gerard. Gerard is a very passionate collector of vintage Hamilton watches, and you know that we are very passionate about vintage watches in general, and also very excited always to devour new knowledge and learn more. So Gerard will be a great interlocutor for that. Welcome to the channel, Gerard.
Thank you for having me. This is really cool. I've never done anything like this before.
It's okay. We'll we'll go slow.
Okay.
Um, well, first of all, I just want to ask you what ticked you off in the beginning. What ignited for you the passion for watches?
Well, believe it or not, um, I had a desire for a pocket watch. Um, and I dove right into like the local ones because here in Massachusetts, there's a couple, like I bought a Waltham. Um, there's a few manufacturers here. And I wanted one that was kind of close to home. And I wanted to have a mechanical watch because I didn't have one before that. And I wanted to be able to open it and look at it and all that kind of thing. The same thing that drives everybody with this hobby. But it was just a desire for something particular. I got a big old 1889 Waltham with a silver case, and I don't know. I fell in love right after that. The I liked I like the technical aspect. I really like movements. They're fun to look at. They're amusing to tinker with. I'm not real good at tinkering, but I do. And
You're cutting off a little bit, Gerard.
off. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Um, the thing that got me into Hamilton though was when I was a kid. They used to have these LL Bean watches.
Yeah.
LL Bean is a outdoors store, and Hamilton made their watches during the 80s. I wanted one real bad, but I was a kid and I didn't have any money, so I couldn't get one. Now I have 11 of the 12. Um,
That's amazing.
they're really quite nice.
I love the way you began your journey, because a lot of us, a lot of the contemporary collectors, of course, are almost exclusively focused on wristwatches. I'm
Yeah.
guilty of that as well. Even though I always have a kind of really respect for pocket watches, because they have a very different presence, a very different kind of substance that they bring into the room, that they bring into the space. um, and I like the fact that it started when you were young as well, and you were pining for this watch that you couldn't get at the time, and you worked your way towards it. And it is a very American story. I like that, through LL Bean and
Yeah,
Hamilton.
yeah. There's actually one remaining watch because I want the collection. I want the whole group, and I've been searching for it for years. It's kind of like my white whale. Uh, my watchmaker, up until this year because he passed away, but my watchmaker was the official watchmaker of LL Bean during the Hamilton period. So he left me a bunch of stuff. Um, this here little pocket watch is an
Wow.
extremely rare one. It's got an anchor through the LL Bean, and he didn't even know it existed. And he worked for them, specifically. So it's a there's a lot to every niche in Hamilton, you know.
And of course, we are talking about, one of the most storied American makers, which was heavily affected by the quartz crisis
Yes,
and
indeed.
was taken over eventually by Omega and Tissot in the conglomerate they had at the time, SSIH. And
That
now,
actually produced, sorry, that
no,
actually
go ahead.
produced two of my favorite watches. Here's one of them. That is a high beat. Hamilton would never have messed with a high beat if it wasn't for the fact that they were owned by Tissot and Omega at the time. They also produced a chronometer, which I'd show you, but it's off its service. And they didn't produce any chronometers before that either. So, that had a nice effect on Hamilton, which held until like the 80s. The 80s were a dark time.
Yeah, I think it took, we don't always know where to put the threshold or where to put the turning point for that. But the quartz crisis, when the watches started being produced commercially in the early 70s, took a little while to hit. And it hit some brands harder than others.
Yep.
Ultimately, I think Hamilton had a very strong comeback later on, with the emergence of online communities, especially because it is a very interesting entry point to the Swatch group. And it's perhaps some of the best times now to be interested in vintage Hamilton. We were exchanging a few words right before the show, because two recent blockbuster movies, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and Oppenheimer, are featuring an incredible array of vintage and vintage inspired pieces. So it's very exciting.
There's the Bulova, not Bulova, Bolton. That's the Indiana Jones watch right there.
Right. Yeah.
I've got, the original one here and not the quartz one. And this one here is similar to the Oppenheimer watch. It's like a year later.
Very nice. Yeah. So Gerard already started enlightening us. This is the watch that was used in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It is a quartz version from their American Classic series. And I'm not giving away any major spoilers here, but it is also a very sentimental piece in the movie. It ends up being a tribute to Sean Connery's character as well, since it's supposed to be a watch passed down from father to son.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's cool.
And it is very cool because, as Gerard said, it is a quartz piece. It's supposed to be in the late 60s in the movie, so doesn't make sense perhaps chronologically unless there's some time travel involved. But it does make sense a lot horologically and in terms of the plot line, because it really tells the story as this generational tale. And the shape is, of course, very classical Art Deco, very beautiful aesthetic with small seconds and applied numerals, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, on mine for sure. I don't know for the new one. Oh, those look applied. Yeah, that is really nice. That's built basically the same as mine. The dial, I mean, the Bolton is one of those really long running watches. It came out in the 40s, and they reintroduced it in the 60s. They even made a Bolton 2. But yeah, no, that was like one of their most popular selling watches.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. I think they in the current lineup, they have a mechanical version of it as well, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's over 50 millimeters long.
okay, that's a little larger, the mechanical one. I see.
Yeah. I looked at that when I wanted it because it was pretty, and then I got to see it, and I was like, well, I can't wear that. You know,
No, I can see that.
My wrist is too small.
Yeah, same here. I suffer from the same affliction, and you know, the thing is, a lot of cushion cased watches sometimes, especially if they have that sort of curvature, can sit really well on the wrist, but there's always a limit, of course.
Yeah. When it hangs over the edges of my wrist, I call it quits.
Very, very legitimate. But yeah, this is a beautiful watch, and I was very happy to see how it was featured in the movie. Of course, you know, when you see the movie, like a normal person, you might just notice it as an element of the story. After all, the story is about passage of time, time travel. It is supposed to be the last Indiana Jones movie, at least with Harrison Ford.
Yep.
But you know, when you watch it like a watch nerd, which is my only way of engagement, of course, you see all these different elements and pieces of the story that make a lot of sense to us, right? You know, it's something, again, it's something generational. It has a story, and it tells much more than time. And I was really happy that Hamilton was part of that.
Yeah, they're really good at getting themselves noticed in movies. Something like over 3,000.
Right.
They brag about it a lot. I would too.
Yeah, I mean, it's they even have their whole tagline about it, right? You know, Hamilton and precise storytelling, or the art of precise storytelling, or something like that.
Something like that. It's I don't keep up with the new stuff as well as I should. I mean, I do run a group on Hamilton, but it's all vintage to me.
I respect that. And we were also talking about Oppenheimer. Of course, that's even more up your alley, because the Oppenheimer character himself wears three different vintage pieces sourced from the Hamilton archives, apparently, and the other characters too wear a number of different Hamilton watches. Let me see here. I thought, here are the three that appear on the wrist of, oops, Oppenheimer.
Yeah, that's the cushion B. I'm not sure if the next one over is a military issue.
Right, because of the black dial, right? That's why you are suspecting the Lexington might be.
Oh yeah, it's a Lexington. Okay. It looks a lot like the issue watch.
I mean, it might be. You would know better about which particular models were mil spec or military issued, but a lot of these are 30s and early 40s watches. I think in the case of the Endicott, maybe it's 40s, and the other two are probably 30s, I'm guessing.
Well, is that steel, the center watch?
I think so.
I think we're talking 40s then, because they didn't start using steel. Like, it was a big deal when they did. They called it styled in steel and introduced this one. See if we can get a picture of that. This one, well, anyway, that's the Clinton, and they made a big deal out of starting to use steel.
And this is the military ordnance watch that Matt Damon's character was wearing.
Yeah, see, it looks an awful lot like that other watch.
The Leslie Groves Jr. character. But yeah, from a certain period, you know, when you see black dials from a lot of the different brands, it's I guess it's right to suspect that they might have a certain military connection. But you know, in the picture, I'm not quite sure actually, you know, if
Yeah.
it's steel or not.
Oh
It
yeah, you
might
know,
be
it looks a
chrome
little
plated.
yellow too.
Could be.
Yeah.
But it's a very classic aesthetic that we even today associate with Hamilton, you know, this sort of very legible, slightly oversized numerals, field watch kind of genre.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, they did that a lot, and they did it really well.
And the cushion watch you were showing us, that's a very cool one. You said the example you have is a little bit different from the one
Yes,
featured in the movie, which is here.
I have actually, you know, a couple cushions because I really like the style, but that particular one is with the round crystal.
Mm-hmm.
It the cushion B, which is after the cushion
Mm-hmm.
came out, they changed the movement. That's what the B stands for usually, is they change the movement in the watch. And then after that, they produced the one that I showed with the cushion shaped crystal. It was so that one's probably with the no small seconds, no seconds at all. That's probably 1926.
Oh, that's really cool. I love the hands, which are really ornate and have kind of this teardrop shape for the hour, and
Yeah.
then the numerals, of course.
Yeah, no, it is a brilliant watch. I had a couple in gold. They were really nice, white gold.
Wow. They were making white gold pieces like that in the 30s.
Oh yeah.
That's really cool.
Actually, white gold, green gold, and rose gold were very popular.
Amazing.
For example, here we have a tonneau, 1928 in white gold, and then a 1928 cushion in white gold, and then who else is in here? But it was a thing that they did because I guess colored gold was popular in the 20s and 30s. It's come back on different times. They started doing rose gold again in the 40s, but then the war came and they stopped producing. And then they started doing rose gold again more recently.
Yeah, these are beautiful pieces. Do you have anything like the Endicott that's also a very
Well, I don't have an Endicott, but I have something that's frequently mistaken for one. This is a tachometer B. It's not got the small seconds, but it's very, very similar. In fact, some unscrupulous sellers will put the cases and the dials from those together, and they don't really belong. But that is a common thing. You find an Endicott with a tachometer dial, or a tachometer with an Endicott dial.
Well, the movements would need some modification too, though, right? Because one is sweep center and one is small second, no?
Yeah, it would be a different movement, yeah. But the dial itself, it finds itself switched onto, and the case is very similar to the Endicott case. That I don't know how they make the Franken watches they make, but they are available on eBay if you want them.
But that's actually a good point to ask you this question. And
yeah,
you know, it's always good to talk with experts and people who are really experienced in these things, what do you do yourself, Gerard, when you want to avoid these kinds of watches that are like patchwork or Franken watches, as you call them?
Well,
What can you
yep.
do as a buyer, as a collector, to avoid these sorts of watches?
Well, the first answer is going to be difficult. Research. You know, you either learn what you're doing or you learn the hard way. You know what I mean? So that's really about it. You want to know. A lot of people see that Hamilton had many models, and they had different names, and some of them it's hard to like. It's hard to know them all, and I mean, some can slip in there, I suppose, especially just change dials. But
Mm-hmm.
the only thing you can do is familiarize yourself with the models. I'm going through that with Omega right now. I'm familiarizing myself with those. Damn, that's hard. But the only thing I've done to prepare myself for this is collect them for several years and know what's what. I don't think there's an easy method.
No, precisely. I like this answer actually, because this is what I always tell my audience, that you are your best advocate, and the only way you can learn is by researching. And we do live in so many ways in an information age, so things are out there. You can take your time.
Yep.
But most importantly, like what you said, Gerard, at the end, there's nothing that substitutes years and years of that study combined with hands-on experience.
Absolutely. I mean, I would love to say that I just fell into this and it was something that, but I've been collecting for like 20 years. So, I didn't fall into anything. I took baby steps, but I got here.
Yeah, nothing really, I think, can replace going out there, examining examples, getting yourself wet a little bit. You do have to do more than dipping your toes. You do have, I think every respected collector has gone through certain experiences that may have taught them the hard way, as
Oh,
you
absolutely.
said, over the years. So part of that is part of the learning curve as well.
Yep.
But ultimately, I think there's so much out there. You did say, and I want to share that with the audience as well. You did say um, you lead a Hamilton community. Do you guys have a web page, a
Oh, it's a
forum,
Facebook group.
a Facebook group?
Hamilton Watch Owners.
Can
It's
you share a link in the private chat so I can post it to the chat here?
not while I'm doing this. I only have a phone.
Okay, let me see if I can actually find it. Hamilton Watch Owners
Owners,
Club, you said?
just owners. HWO.
Let's see. I think I found it.
It's got a few Hamiltons as a logo.
And about 17.7K members, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm posting it here.
Thank you.
I always, of course, you're more than welcome. I always like these sorts of communities, especially when you kind of reach critical mass. There's so much knowledge that when
Yeah.
you post something in advance of a major purchase, or when you start your journey of doing this sort of research, um, there are a lot of different opinions. Sometimes that makes it even harder
It
because
does sometimes.
there's no reconciliation. I'm Jewish, so I know that when you sit around the table with five other people, there are 10 different opinions, so it never gets
Right.
resolved. And watch collecting is very much like that too. But at least with Hamilton specifically, and with Gerard here that you are not alone in this journey, and that there will be people who will show you the way, who will share with you their opinion, their knowledge, their experience. And that's why we love the internet.
Right. I have to plug somebody else's group.
Of course.
The Vintage Hamilton group. Vintage Hamilton Watches, watch collectors, I think it is. Joe Hamway's group. It's full of the best people who know unbelievable amounts of stuff. I feel like I don't know anything when I talk to these people, you know. And if you have questions about a Hamilton that you think nobody knows, these people know.
And that's a Facebook group as well.
Yes, yes.
And Vintage Hamilton Watches. That's what it's called. Simply.
It's got a few Hamiltons as it's got a few Hamiltons as a logo too. There's a different one with a picture of the factory. That's a different group.
That's not it. Okay. I'm trying to see. I found the one with the factory. So let's see.
Yeah. And the
Hamilton, is it Hamilton Vintage Watch Collectors, perhaps?
It could
about
be
2,000 members.
How many?
About 2,000 members.
Yes, that's right. That's the one.
Okay. All right. So these are the two links back to back. One is the group that Gerard leads. This is Hamilton owners, not necessarily vintage focused, I'm given to understand, and almost 20,000 members, which is great. I'm sure there are very lively discussions.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of knowledge in my group. I'm very happy to.
And then there's also a smaller but much more focused group for vintage Hamilton watches. So if you like being part of these Facebook communities, those are great resources for you.
They really are. I've met a lot of people who know and have parts and know how to service them. And oh my goodness, the connections from the internet are wonderful. They really are. Because before, sourcing parts wasn't very easy.
And I mean, I love that story, and may he rest in peace, when you were talking about your watchmaker. That's, I think, one of the most beautiful things too, even before and without the internet. It brings us into communion, really, with people, that with whom we wouldn't cross paths otherwise.
Right, definitely. And I've met a ton of people, because I like to meet them in real life too. And I've been flabbergasted by how many just genuinely nice people are involved in watches. I haven't met too many difficult people at all.
Well, your experience beats mine in this regard.
Yeah, your mileage may vary.
I have met in equal measure. Let's put it this way. I always meet very lovely people. I always meet very difficult people, because again, you know this very well, I'm sure, from your own experience of collecting. We are obsessive people. We are very detail oriented. So that can bring out sometimes the best and the worst out of people. And I don't want to also drive this sort of wedge. Some of the most difficult people I have met are also some of the most lovely people I have met in the watch hobby. So it does go hand in hand sometimes.
Oh yeah, that's definitely true. What do you call it? Some of the people that I rely on as experts are not people I'd want to sell a watch to.
But those are the people that keep you honest and raise your standards and raise your knowledge, and ultimately, like you implied there is a market for everything. Honestly, I had as a guest Periscope Jose Perez, who's, one of his specialties is exposing, fake watches and Franken watches and these sorts of watch-related frauds and scandals. And his take is actually, it might surprise other people, but he just says, we need to be transparent. We need to just make sure that people who are these kinds of artists and artisans are recognized and honored a certain way, as long as we know what is going on. If it's a recreation, if it's an homage, if it's a production, there's nothing wrong with that, because with the stigma on these sorts of reproductive and restorative work, a lot of other fakes start propping up that claim to be 100% authentic with unimaginable premiums attached to them. So it's actually a very tricky question, and ultimately, it's important to have standards, and it's important to be transparent, especially if you are wheeling and dealing, selling and buying.
Absolutely. I'm not bragging, but I've got a good reputation. And the reason I do is because I am transparent. Because if I know that there's something wrong with it, or there's something not exactly right about it, I'm going to tell you about it before you buy it. It's just how it is.
So I know you did say that you started maybe obsessing in the same way about Omega as well, and that LL Bean watches from your childhood brought you to Hamilton. Did you choose specifically to focus on Hamilton? Why and how that world was perhaps enough for you, at least until now, to sustain you? Maybe you can tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, definitely. The thing that I love about Hamilton is the variety. You have these great quality American watches, with American movements. You really can't beat them. They were the best available at the time. And they really, I'm looking at about 30 of them right now in front of me, and they're not even similar. Some of them, they're just very different watches. There's a variety of style, really interesting pieces. This black dial Ryan here is gorgeous, and it comes in a couple of different flavors. There's the black dial and gold, black dial and white gold, the white gold with white dial, and the white gold with black dial. That you could actually create a collection out of this particular watch, and that's fascinating. They made so many different models that there's something for just about everybody, especially when you get into the 60s and the asymmetrical ones. Oh my God, those are great.
Yeah, I like that. That one, I am pretty passionate about American watchmaking too. I am excited about what has been going on in the last decade or so. There are serious and genuine efforts of reviving watchmaking, at least in a more boutique sense, in
Absolutely.
the US. We have Josh Shapiro here, J.N. Shapiro Watches, who has just started producing his Resurgence series. And he gave a very nice lecture on rise, basically birth, death, and rebirth of American watchmaking at the Horological Society of New York at the beginning of this year. So I'll post the link for that lecture in the chat, so you can check it later, and I will send it to you with email, Gerard, as well. And
thank you.
I'm for that reason, I'm very interested in Hamilton, and I know, nowadays they are based in Switzerland. Apparently, they were
Mhm.
nice enough to open a boutique in
In
Lancaster,
Lancaster. Yeah.
Pennsylvania, actually.
I'm probably going
So
to go down and just,
that's great. I mean, I'm glad they are honoring that heritage,
yeah.
because honestly, up until, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I know the history more or less, up until the late 60s, basically, these were, like you said, American made watches with American movements.
Yep.
And then there's a Swiss movement period
Yeah.
until
They
the Omega Tissot
movements to,
takeover.
yeah, they started using Swiss movements in '53. The
Okay.
the the Hamilton, Illinois line, the Hamilton, Illinois line came out in 1953. This is this was a test because they had bought Illinois in 1928. They revived them in 1953 to see if people would accept Swiss movements in an American watch. They did, and in 1954 they came out with all these automatics.
Yeah, well, that's really fascinating. How times change, right? I think, there's the sentiment now, and there are some initiatives to bring back American manufacturing in so many different forms.
Yep.
But it's nice to harken back to that time where people were that meticulous about what they might prefer, and that it was even a question, would a Swiss made movement be okay in an
Right.
American watch? um, and again, that's the time travel there. That's the kind of thinking that the world of watches and horology makes available to us, right? That there was a time not too long ago where people were so prideful about American manufacturing that they would hesitate putting a Swiss made movement into an American watch.
Yeah. Yeah. They they didn't. This is the disappointing part about Hamilton. They didn't make an automatic of their own, um, and it. I think they just kind of were trying to make the automatic because it was popular, but instead of designing their own, they outsourced it, and that marks like a sea change in the manufacturing of what they did, because they did everything in house. They even made their own oil for the watches. You know,
Wow.
yeah. But but when they did move to automatics, they I don't know they just didn't have the get up and go to make one of their own. Elgin did. Elgin made a really nice one, the 760.
Mm.
But that wasn't enough to save Elgin, but they made one. But Hamilton, on the other hand, switched to these. This is a Swiss automatic movement inside there, and
And what kind of automatic movement is that? Micro rotor
no, that's a regular full rotor.
or
Uh,
full rotor?
yeah, I have a couple micro rotor ones, not right in front of me, but the micro rotor was Buren's invention in the late 50s, early 60s, and Hamilton, instead of making their own, they just bought Buren, and
That
it,
works.
yeah, it's what they did with Illinois. Illinois was making a square movement. They needed a square movement. They bought Illinois.
That's also very American, by the way.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, capitalism unbound. Let's just buy them out and integrate them into our own machine. And it's it has served them well, but like you said, maybe in hindsight we are looking at it and thinking, like, what would have happened, what if
Right.
Hamilton actually devised their own self-winding mechanism, where would that have taken them?
Because
But
the
yeah.
770, the last movement they made, 1955, it came out. 22 jewel hand wind. It's still one of the better hand wind movements that you can buy. It's fantastic. They really knew what they were doing, but they didn't expand. They didn't go into automatics. They didn't go into I don't know why they didn't, but it is a little disappointing.
Well, I mean, one perspective is always interesting to me, because in trying to understand historically Rolex's dominance in the world of wristwatches, people make a lot of references to the Oyster case, right? Which was one of the early and reliable waterproof, weatherproof, dustproof watch cases. And in contemporary time, we don't quite understand what kind of revolution that was, because we take so many things for granted.
Oh yeah, like a lot of the watches I've been showing you, the backs press on, and they don't press on very, very tightly. They hold, but they're not letting anything. They're not keeping anything out.
And the other part of that story is, of course, Rolex's early patent of the full rotor automatic movement. That's why they are called Oyster Perpetual, right? So that has left a lot of brands in the dust, at least for a short while, where they had to
they did for the patent to expire.
Work their way through, or around rather, bumper style automatic movements, micro rotor movements, which in the long run actually ended up being also very inventive and aesthetically pleasing in its own regard, not only because of the way it looks, which is fantastic, but also because of how it sinks the rotor into the level of the bridge plates, and thus makes a slender piece, right? So it's I think that's also part of it, right? R&D is a huge investment. That's why Hamilton thought it was, hey, let's just buy them out, in the case of Illinois, or
Buren,
the micro rotor company. So it is a huge investment, and I can understand why they perhaps didn't go the way of devising their own movement from scratch in terms of self-winding.
Oh yeah, there's that, and then there's the fact that the Swiss were subsidizing their watchmakers, so Hamilton couldn't compete price wise with their own. Say they put together an automatic, they'd have to charge for all that R&D, and Swiss were way below them in price.
So you basically told us that Hamilton is a whole microcosm, that they have such a diverse catalog. There's something that can appeal to anyone.
I think.
And I actually agree. With the little I know, I find them very intriguing and very exciting to even start talking about it in this way. Broaching as a topic. Are you collecting other brands, and what are you looking for that is different from Hamilton? I know you mentioned Omega, but what are you chasing these days?
I'm wearing Tudor.
Nice.
Yeah, it's got a linen dial. I really like special dials. I've picked up something like that. That's a hobnail dial. That really turns me on. I like texture. I like so it's not so much the brand first, it's what they're offering for aesthetics. Because I'm also chasing a piping rock from Hamilton because of the way it looks, and I'm making moves on a Cartier.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a the one that I found is sterling silver, a Tank Louis, and it's just, I need it.
This is the piping rock, right? You know, it was in the Oppenheimer movie as well. Is this
That,
it? The
yeah,
piping rock? Yeah.
and it's one of the most fantastic watches, I think. It's small, but it's beautiful. And the 979 movement in it is really quite good as well. It's sought after.
Yeah, and again, I can see that the aesthetic orientation in it too. You know, it's really a very fascinating piece of design. Of course, you have the tonneau shaped case, but it's also pierced.
Yep,
And
and then you have the hinged lugs.
yeah, and the Roman numerals are around the dial on a bezel.
Totally out of character for most things in the 20s, actually, having a bezel.
Yeah, it's an incredible piece of design, and I can see I can see also from this particular choice, again, this is the Hamilton piping rock as it is featured on I think it's a General Leslie Groves Jr.'s wrist, Matt Damon's character in Oppenheimer.
Yep.
And Gerard was talking about his investment in aesthetics as well, because clearly he's a movement guy. He knows a lot about the beating heart of the watches, but perhaps now in his third decade of collecting, he's also getting more heavily invested in the aesthetics and how watches
It's
look.
yeah, it's funny because I'm getting more heavily invested, but I'm not looking at any newer watches. I'm looking at old watches still. So
No, there's it is actually perhaps richer when you look at vintage, because okay, that there are a lot of, we like to think that newer is always better in this abstract sense, and we like to think that people are focusing on all these different things now. But it turns out that actually when it comes to design genre watches, as it's usually called, like the piping rock we were looking at from Hamilton, or for example, the designs by Gilbert Albert that were done for Patek Philippe and others. A lot of times in the vintage era, people took more challenges, people took more risks with their designs. They were more daring, and hey, you can be a skeptic and say that's why they flopped, that's why they don't exist anymore, that's why they don't make those case shapes anymore. But more for us, right?
right, more for us. And also when they flop, on occasion when there's a flop, 50 years later, that's a rare watch.
Yeah. And also the other thing I wanted to add to that is, because you were saying you're interested in dials, and textures on dials.
Yep.
Again, engine turning is now, I'm not punning here, since resurgence is the word that Shapiro uses as well, but it is experiencing a resurgence now. But still, it's almost a lost art, right? Whereas, of course, in the world of vintage watches, you see such stunning pieces, and it's not stamping, it's not CNC guided.
Yeah, it's not done by computer.
It is actually someone applying the right kind of pressure, taking their time, and going through that meticulous process of applying that particular pattern to the dial. And there's something very magical about that. Of course, the end product is impressive in its own way, but also, you know, when you start obsessing over it in detail and thinking about the story, thinking about how it is perhaps as elaborate in its own way as the mechanism that beats inside the watch,
This is true. This is
that
true.
opens up an entire different world for you. So I'm very excited about what you will amass over the next 2 decades and more.
I will be hunting a brigade because I like ground for enamel too. You know,
Oh my God. Yeah.
yeah, because that's a lost art. Um, the first watch I bought, first wristwatch I bought was a micro brand, and it had an enamel dial, and that's why I bought it, because it was similar to the pocket watches that I loved. You know.
Yeah. And again, that's similar but also different, right? Because enamel dials have this kind of simplistic beauty, a kind
Yeah.
of pure elegance. And once again, that might not be immediately visible on the surface because of how perfect it is. But
Right.
once you start learning about that arduous process of producing that perfection, a whole new world opens up again. Like, you know,
Yeah.
how certain colors are more difficult to achieve.
Mm-hmm. I actually, to get an idea, I went to an art place, and they had me. They let me do some of the enameling. Um, so I've got a little medallion that has a nautilus shell shape to it, and it's enamel that I made on a thing because I wanted to see how it was done.
That's amazing. And, you know, look, I wouldn't be able to produce anything. So I admire you already for having actually managed to produce something that you can be proud to preserve.
Mhm.
Um, JB has a great question for you. Um, 4.99. Thank you so much, JB, for the super chat. Just catching you all. Among Hamilton collectors, how is the Ventura viewed? That's, of course, the iconic Elvis watch. As an Elvis fan, I had to ask. So let's see what Gerard thinks, both from his personal perspective and his perspective of leading a 20K strong community. Basically, what does the Hamilton collector think about the Ventura?
Well, the Ventura is an icon, and it's I mean, it does split people's opinions, because there are some people who don't like the mid-century modern look, you know, and they're not going to be happy with any of the asymmetricals. But as far as most collectors, the uh, the Ventura is one that we'd love to have. You know, I don't really enjoy the electric movement, because the electric movement doesn't like me and tends to die when I wear it. But as far as like the actual style and the design, it's an amazing piece, and Hamilton knew it, because later in 1961 they came out with a Pacer A, which is basically the same shape, uh, gold filled, not gold, and an automatic movement in it. So you know, they knew they had a good thing going on that one.
And Gerard, you have freely admitted again, now that you are in the second stage of your collecting career, you don't have to care much about if it works or not, as long as it looks good.
Right?
You'll be
No,
fine.
that's not true, because I wear them. I have to. I'm
That's
one of
true.
those guys. I can't have it and just sit it in a box. I need to wear
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And when you wear it, it needs to show the correct time, I guess.
Yes, that's important, and when that's applicable, because I'm OCD about that. You know.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. You know, we were just talking about again your passion for Hamilton, but also your increasing excitement about design, and the Ventura brings the two together in such beautiful way. It's
Yeah,
an asymmetric shape.
Mr. Arbib, the designer of these watches, he really had like a vision. Uh, there's some amazing watches in the asymmetrical line. The Flight, the Ventura, of course, the Pacer, which looks just like it. The I mean, it was. I don't know where he was getting his ideas from. I think from the automotive industry, but my God, did he make some great looking watches?
Yeah, I think he was also designing for the automotive industry, if I'm not mistaken, right? Richard
Yes,
Erbib.
yes,
Yeah, it's really fascinating because again it looks very futuristic on the one hand, but also the Ventura as a shape, it's also kind of timeless. It's like a pebble in a certain way as well. Kind
hmm
of a nice little rock you would find on when you are walking by the ocean shore. So
yep.
it has that futuristic aspect, but it's kind of timeless and organic in another way, from another perspective. So it's very pleasant. Not exactly my style, but
Well,
I can certainly appreciate it.
that is my favorite era. Is the mid-century modern style. 50s and 60s is where I tend to focus my collection. Um, the 30s are great. I love the watches, but something about that mid-century modern look speaks to me. It tells me that I need to wear that watch. You know, um, unfortunately, you run into a lot more Swiss movements, which isn't bad. The Swiss movements weren't bad. They're just not a fully authentic American watch. Um, but you run into a lot of Swiss movements in the mid-century. But even with that, the design all by itself, it, it's just beautiful to me.
Yeah, this is, by the way, Richard Henry Erbib, um, who is the designer of Ventura. And as you can see, he is a pretty sharp man, and did decent for himself. As you can see, that's
Yeah,
his girlfriend, Betty Page.
nice.
But here are some of his other designs for the automotive industry.
I'd drive that.
How about this one?
That looks like it's a hover car. Where are the wheels?
I think there's some wheels, but yes, it does look like that sort of uh, what was it? The Jetsons kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
aesthetic.
definitely.
But yeah, here are a few other designs by um, Erbib, and
Yeah, that one right there, middle row on the closest to the picture of the Ventura. Yeah, that one. That's an Everest. I just sold one of those. I love that watch. They came out with a quartz reissue of it, and it's
wow.
not exactly the same. It's more sort of an homage to the original, and that is one of my favorite watches from the modern era that I've ever had. It it looks wonderful on the wrist.
And I appreciate that they are doing reissues and they are reproducing some of these watches.
Yep.
And I can, again, as much as I don't always go for quartz movements in these sorts of shaped, uniquely designed watches, I know how difficult it is, again, to source a movement, or better yet, design something from scratch for something that would be so niche, so specific.
Well, in the case of this watch, that's an electric. They did, in fact, create their own movement. 1956, they came out with those with that particular watch. That was one of the first electric movements, and the electric movement, I don't know if you know, is a hybrid. It's got a battery instead of a mainspring, but then you have the the balance is half regular balance, half electrical coil.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. The 500, 500A, and 505 movements. Um, they're just amazing. They only run about 2 hertz, so they're not extremely precise, but they're they're fascinating. I mean, they came out with a battery 12 years before quartz, you know?
I would I would love to actually hear like an extended lecture or read more about that as well, because we go crazy about Grand Seiko spring drive, these sorts of hybrid movements.
Yep.
And they have been kind of, again, having a moment more recently, because there are a lot of mecha quartz chronographs, for
Yep.
example,
Yep.
with vintage designs, vintage inspired designs. So it is having a comeback, these sorts of hybrid movements, and it would be nice to learn more on another occasion about the kind of electric movements that were part of this age of mid-century innovation in horology.
Absolutely. There's a guy, maybe you've heard of him, probably you've heard of him, Rene Rondo.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's part of the vintage group, and he's really the guy to ask any question about these two, because I mean he wrote the book, you know, and I get to ask him questions because I know him, you know. That's one of the things I love about it. I have a community that I can reach out to for answers I don't know.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. So once again, guys, Gerard was really generous to come here, chat with us for an hour. But if you do want to talk to him more, I think the easiest way would be to go sign up to the Hamilton Owners Facebook group, which he leads. And I'm sure he's
Yep.
also a lively participant in the vintage group. And both of the links are there in the chat for you.
I can be on Facebook, and I can also be found on. I don't have my own website because I discovered that I spent more time updating it than selling. But I am available pretty easily on most. Like I have a Telegram, I have a WhatsApp, I have you can get a hold of me in a whole bunch of ways, and I'm always happy to help.
And would you like to share your email address too, perhaps?
Sure. It's my first initial last name, G Cardinal, and it's 42@gmail.com. Pardon me.
Bless you. So just want to make sure this is what we were corresponding on, right?
Yep, that's me.
gcardinal42@gmail.com if you want to reach Gerard directly.
Yeah, and I'm available on Messenger too as Gerard Cardinal.
Cool. So those are ways you can reach Gerard if you want to simply learn more about Hamilton watches, if you're in the market for a vintage Hamilton, or if you simply want to talk about watches. I'm sure he will be, as always, very generous with his time. I really appreciate this opportunity, Gerard. It was a pleasure for me.
Oh, it's great for me too.
To learn from you, to have the privilege of introducing you to my community. And look, I mean, I hope you subscribe to the channel. Whenever you see a live stream, if you're in the mood, if you have some spare time, whenever it is, feel free to just join.
Okay.
Audio, video, whatever. You want to show off some watches, you want to just talk about Hamilton, about anything, it's great to have you as part of the community. And thank you for sharing your passion and knowledge with us.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. I I mean, my passion and knowledge are as much as I got, but I'm willing to share them. You know,
And
they're not as everybody's, but I'm willing to share what I got.
I mean, it certainly grows as we share and as we exchange. Um, Ultimately, it's about learning together. So, you know, it's really a pleasure, and I know I've learned a lot already from you in this 1 hour, and I look
Thank you.
forward to learning more.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your participation and for your interventions in the chat, for your questions. Please hit the like button on your way out. JB, thank you so much for your generous super chats. Haidar, before we log out, he was talking about how the Acatron came back a couple of years back. That's also true. Certainly, I think people are becoming a little more open-minded now that we have kind of secured the ground for our passion for mechanical watches. I think people are more interested in venturing out and making certain compromises, because people had the industry had PTSD from the quartz crisis. I think that I can freely admit this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Seiko was really cool, but then they killed the Swiss watch industry.
And then, again, I try to give them as much credit, because with the recent more internet-driven and social media-driven resurgence in terms of the passion for mechanical watches, Seiko played an important part as well, because they make great watches at the entry level that is accessible to a wide variety of collectors. Of course, again, even a couple of $100 can be a lot of money for a watch for many people, and I understand that. But there are so many great options, and Seiko is one of them at that entry level. But it's true, they have been both the villain and the hero in this story in so many ways.
Right.
All right. With that, we are signing off. Thank you, everybody. But thank you first and foremost and most to Gerard. We'll see you in the next one. We talked Hamilton watches today. Hopefully, we'll talk more about them in the future. Take care.